There we go.
Okay, Douglas, you can start.
Okay. These plasma devices that are used are nano-coated metal tubes, water energizing tubes, and plasma water energizing tubes using CO2 Gans, using a copper nano-coated tube, and using a copper-coated nano-coated coil with CO2 Gans. These plasma devices are used to energize water and also raise alkalinity in water for agricultural uses. The nano-coated metal tubes, water energizing tubes, is what we refer to them. Have a coupled together with a zinc tube, a PVC coupling, a copper nano-coated piece of actually there's several pieces inside the tube here, and then an iron tube, and then another plastic fitting on the end here that connects to an inline agricultural system to decontaminate water, raise the pH level, and also filter, I have found out. This is the tube that you just seen in the schematic that I have created out of parts. Some new, some I had laying around the house. The half-inch copper, and we've got brass and a brass elbow and a half-inch brass hard pipe with commingled with black iron and an 1.25 inch galvanized water line. We don't use these in the United States for water except in places for farm use. So we don't use it for potable drinking water anymore. But inside this tube, you'll see underneath it, there's several series of coil nano-coated copper. And they're 26 millimeters wide, and they're 13 inches long, and they are 4 of them, ranging in sizes from 3/8 all the way up to 1 inch in diameter. I used a wooden dowel rod to wrap these around in a counterclockwise direction, and they're inside of each other, and they fit inside of the galvanized tube. And
do we have a blueprint of this, please?
Yes, sir.
You have winded the tube winding you show us. You said you winded it. You winded it anti-clockwise.
Yes, sir. Right here. I didn't actually draw a blueprint of this. We can make one real quick.
It has to be done because people can see what they have.
Yes, sir. No problem.
It's very interesting because I came up with that same structure.
I found when I put this inside the filtration device, it was used as a nano coating energizer is what it was used for, to energize and supply nutrients for plant growth. What I found in the process of using this is that it also works as a filter. It collects things, sediments, and it attracts it like an ionizer is the only way I could describe it.
But the water, does the water touch the material direct?
On this one, yes.
You cannot do that because
it goes through another filtration stage.
Okay, but we cannot. This is part of the way we work. Anything which we consume at the end cannot be directly in touch with nanomaterial.
Yeah, this is at the beginning, sir, of the filtration system.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Carry on.
Yeah, this is the beginning of the system.
Yeah, carry
on. The water comes in over here on the right side of the page. If we could go back to that last page so I could clarify some things for some people. The water comes in on the right side of the page over here in the half-inch.
Slow down. Slow down. We've got to learn. It's not just to show. We've got to learn in a nice way. You're showing us beautiful things. Just take your time.
Yes, sir. I'm just nervous.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm telling you to slow down.
On the right side of the page, you'll see a half-inch copper hard pipe, and this is the inlet side of the water that comes from the reservoir tank in the bottom. It comes up and goes through the brass, through the black iron, through the what I call the filtration, the nano-coated filtration device, and then outside and down the vinyl tubing. Now we can go to the next page, Ernie. Down to yes, you can show the blueprint of the coil, and then there's now this is the coil that Mr. Kesh has said that we advised us on. It's nano-coated, caustic coated, and fire coated, and caustic steam coated. The copper on the inside is a 1/4 inch copper hard tubing that's been caustic coated and steam coated and fire coated, and the vinyl tubing has been caustic coated on the inside. The vinyl tubing holds the CO2 Gans, and the water goes through the copper tubing on the inside that does not have any Gans or anything on the inside of the copper tubing.
And I will just like to add, there's additional design that can be possible. If you don't have any copper tubing, you can use your coils instead of wrapping. So you can use coils to wrap around in case you don't have copper tubing available, but you have wires. So you can also try it.
Ah, that's fantastic. But how do you get the coils inside the pipe?
Well, on my instance, Mr. Kesh, as far as the tubing, I had to have help with my daughters, and they stretched out the tubing, and then the vinyl tubing, because that's the hardest part, because it likes to roll back up on you. And while I inserted the copper tubing inside the vinyl tubing, so I had to have help with my daughters.
Yeah, there were 3 people working with this system. For this one is almost this is 0.75 meters long, and it took 10 meters of coils to just wrap around the hose inside, and we wrap it around with another transparent hose to protect the coils. And this we can put CO2 Gans inside the transparent hose, so the hose inside will only receive the energy of the coil and the coil and the Gans. So there will be no contamination from the materials.
Very much. Carry on.
So let's continue with the experiment of Douglas with using those devices on above.
Yes, sir. The first thing that I noticed when I done my experiment was I done a 15-minute interval test on the first hour, and I was using regular tap water in the reservoir, and in the reservoir, my tap water registered a pH of 7.2, and undissolved solids, parts per million of 223. Within 15 minutes, my pH had dropped down, had went up to 7.6. My parts per million had dropped to 5. Within another 15 minutes, my parts per million went up to 7. The pH 7.3. The next 15-minute interval, the pH jumped to 7.5, and parts per million stayed at 7. And the last 15-minute interval, which would be an hour later, my pH jumped to 7.5 with a parts per million at 9. 24 hours later, the pH had risen to 7.6, and with undissolved solids at 26 and 13 parts per million, confirming that the pH and all the undissolved solids and parts per million were being increased by the effects of the nano-coated structure.
What is that melon doing in your drawing we missed? What was that melon on the top?
That's just a picture of a cantaloupe.
Yeah.
That's one of the controlled experiments that we're using. It's a picture as a reference to, so people know what seeds and the plants that we're fixing to show that we're growing.
Are you using those seeds?
I'm using organically grown seeds that I grew here on my yard in 2013.
Okay, so is those melons inside these other seeds you collected?
Yes, well, not those particular melons, but one similar to.
It was very appetizing, so I just want to.
Yes. Yes. Hard to keep melons with 3 daughters.
Yeah, carry on.
as the control experiment is ordinary growing in reverse osmosis water. And specimen B was in CO2 Gans in soil, four seeds at first. Then I transplanted 2 of the specimens and 1 specimen into and 2 different apparatuses. Specimen 3, which is specimen C, was a drip feed with nano-coated copper RO tap water filtration device. Specimen D is an Aeroponics high pressure mist bucket with CO2.
Slow down, you're going too fast.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cage.
Slow down.
Yes, specimen C is a drip feed, which is a continuous drip feed off of the structure you've seen earlier, which you'll see more of here in a minute, with a nano-coated copper RO, which is reverse osmosis water, tap water filtration device. The water comes out of my RO filter at right around 7.0 to 7.03, depending. And specimen D is an Aeroponics high pressure mist bucket system with CO2 Gans only in it, and 2 gallons. And I have the mixture of the CO2 Gans at 20 milliliters of CO2 Gans per 2 gallons of RO water, which is some really clean water. And I have phenomenal results from the high pressure bucket, as we'll see here shortly. Phenomenal root growth. These are the seeds that that I had to put in CO2 Gans water and tap water during the germination process.
How long did you put them in there?
The CO2 seeds germinated faster by 3 days than the RO water. They were actually, those dates are from my first experiment, and we had an emergency here and something happened. So I restarted the experiment on the 10th with regermination on the 10th of January. And on the 16th of January, I planted them in the soil, which you'll see here shortly because Renan's already updated the file. So the CO2 Gans went then in the soil. I put them both in the soil at the same day. And this is day 10 from germination. And you can see on the right the CO2 Gans in the soil, and you can see on the left the different comparisons. Now these are both under an 18-watt fluorescent bright light or bright white light, minimal wattage. The CO2 Gans in the soil, I have noticed throughout the testing procedures that, and all my data confirms that the CO2 holds a special property that allows moisture to be retained in the soil, whereas the regular RO water on the left here, I have to water every other day. The CO2 Gans, I only have to water once a week.
This is in line with what we saw with the test in Kenya.
Yes, sir.
You get faster, so you don't use that much. And this we have seen a long time. This is why we said these seeds are perfect for Africa. Places like Biafra, where there's always very short summer, where very little rain, these seeds are perfect because it answers the hunger. We know this for a long time now that you're showing us clearly the application.
And if you'll notice the really uniform equal growth is, I like to use the word Mr. Kesh uses, is correct in the CO2 Gans on the right. All the plants are of equal height, equal growth, and they all look terrific. And you'll see the ones on the left in the RO condition that they, one looks, they've all got some kind of little deformity to them, it would appear. They're not growing equally. And they're not healthy and vibrant looking.
Can you tell us what does you have a RO water? Can you explain to us what is
Yes, sir. That is a reverse osmosis is what that is. It's a water filtration device system that is set up in household residential applications and commercial too. But mine is set up for residential, and it's a 7-stage filtration system that takes out 99.9% of all undissolved solids, parts per million, and chlorine, contaminants. It'll take just about anything out except nuclear material.
So you're not actually feeding the poor chap. That's why it's so deformed.
Yes, exactly.
You gotta give him a normal water. You're starving him. It's got nothing to live on. I would have been very, very careful with this, because you have to use a normal water, not the water which is cleaned out. In the nature, we don't have a cleaned out water. So carry on, please.
Yes, sir.
Test, use
Usually in the first stages of plant growth, we find that there's enough in the nutrients in the soil itself for the plant to get through the first 3 weeks of the stages of life without any nutrients at all. So being the case there, you can see that there's a big difference in the CO2 compared to the RO. This is the initial setup that I had started before I moved to the bigger room. And as you can see, the water filtration device in the back corner there going around, the pump pumps it through and it goes back in through a continuous feed into a waterfall, creating aeration. So there's no need for an air pump. It's supplying oxygen into the water. The continuous drip feed is going to the C bucket, the one listed as C, and the D bucket is another controlled plant, and the A bucket is the RO plants, the RO water plants that I had just sitting up there under the light. I had all these plants under the light while I was building the other room. This was a temporary setup so I could keep everything running according to the way we were working the schedule until I could get the room built.
Carry on, please.
This is after the plants were separated, and I left the one in the CO2 Gans soil, and these are the ones in the RO soil here. The ones, there were 4 in each when we started, and the 4 got separated from the soil, and the 4 got separated from the CO2 Gans. 1 was left in the soil, 2 were put into a drip stage, and 1 was put into the Aeroponics mist bucket with CO2 Gans. These are the first, like I said, these are the first pictures of the initial drip stage that I just rigged up temporarily until we could get the ag room built. And this shows the plants being fed. And this shows the growth at day 24. And you can see the soils. This is really good soil. This is potting soil that I got from my wife's flower bed around her roses. She doesn't know that though. And over on the right, we have the CO2 Gans. And as you can see, the soil is not near as good as around the CO2 Gans. I just grabbed some soil out of the yard for it. And the plant is, 3 times the size of the other ones. And there's still no uniform growth on the RO water plants. This is the high pressure Aeroponics mist bucket. There are a series of high pressure jets with a pump inside of a bucket with a net basket with hydroton clay pellets. These are neutral. They won't hold nutrients, and they don't have nutrients, and they don't supply nutrients. They are just a medium for growing in to show people that we can grow plants in any condition, whether it be sand, rock, clay, whatever, using the CO2 Gans. This bucket has only 2 gallons of reverse osmosis water, which is pH at 7.0 and 5 parts per million with 20 milliliters of CO2 Gans added to the water. This is set in an interval of every 4 hours. It clicks on every 4 hours by a timing system and waters the plant for 15 minutes intervals every 4 hours, or 4 times a day, every 6 hours, sorry. This is another updated picture. This is the bucket on the right side after I had just transplanted the plant. So it was going through transplant shock for a few days. I think it was about 3 or 4 days it took to settle out. On the left, we have the drip feed still in its temporary position. Oh, I've got a visitor on that one. Looks like a fly was visiting us. And you can see the 2 drip feed plants are really taking off to their new environment, and they're really loving the energized water that they're receiving from the nano structures. Here's another picture comparing the RO plant to the CO2 Gans plant. As you can see, the notable difference in size to the CO2 on the right compared to the RO on the left. And this is at day 30. This is also at day 30. And for the first time in my life, and I've been farming most of my life and growing cantaloupes for a long time, I have flowers on cantaloupe plants in 30 days. Now, this is a first for me. And this is in the nano-coated copper structure that's on the continuous drip feed. The Aeroponics bucket on the right here, you can see is a slight discoloration. This is still going through transplant shock. Here we see the cantaloupe plants again at day 33. And once again, the CO2 Gans, as you can see, the root structure underneath there is just really taking off. The lower leaves are starting to deplete the energy sources from them and dry up, which is a normal reaction in plant growth. And on the left, we see the RO plants are vibrant and green, but still lacking in the growth structure and the root structure as the CO2 Gans plant. On day 33, we noticed that on the Aeroponics mist bucket that the plant has finally overcome its transitional shock period from transplant. And we look over on the drip feed nano-coating bucket, and we see that just a couple days later that these plants have almost tripled in size, and we have flowers coming off of 3 nodes. I was very excited to see my flowers. Here's a close-up picture of the flowering, and this is at day 34. And like I said, very excited about the flowering. This is a first for me. I've had a fondness in my heart for agriculture. Been involved with it for over 30 years, and so this was this kind of made me jump up and down. I was pretty excited about this because this opens up all kinds of new doors for the world. Now here's the new ag system that I had been working on out in my building, getting it built and getting it set up properly so we could have a proper demonstration. It just took me a while to do it as I'm by myself. And as you can see in the first picture on the right here at the top right corner, we've got the bucket and the control plants and the continuous drip feed system all set up and going with the water filtration device at the top left corner there. You can see that the water comes up through the green tube and it goes into the copper and it goes through the structure and it comes back down and it comes back up and comes through where Renan was going with his pointer through the copper coated CO2 Gans filled energizing water tube, and that feeds the plants. As you can see, it's connected to a smaller, by a reduction of fittings, is connected to a smaller tube that is connected to a manifold tube there on the tray that feeds each plant individually a continuous amount. They all each receive the same amount of water. And as to not put any filtration devices that we buy from a store that would, such as charcoal or anything like that, I made my own filter so somebody couldn't say, well, he's put something in there that's done this. So I used just a aquarium fishnet filter, as you can see where the reservoir drains back down in from the tank and the water goes through the net. There's 13 inches of water or 13 inches of fall from the drain line to the reservoir tank. So there's more than enough adequate aeration. There's no need for an air device to keep water to keep air in the water. This screen works really well, as I have seen. It picks up minute contaminants that go through and don't get caught, and this catches them. And I empty it about every 3 or 4 days for any debris that gets in there. So there's no artificial filters in there at all. It's only nano-coated structure. And here's a graph of the specimens of A, which would be the soil and compared to B and C, which would be the CO2 Gans in the drip feed systems in the bucket system. And you can see the increase in growth compared to the soil. And to be honest, I've actually taken better care of the soil plants because I seen them, they were not doing as well. So I gave them a little extra tender loving care, and you know, I did everything but add nutrients to them. And they're growing, they're really vibrant, they're really green, but they still, in the latter pictures, they're nowhere near the size of the other plants. This is the height growth chart with the comparisons of all three controlled systems. And as you can see, the difference in this also, a notable difference. This is the leaf count, and as you'll see on this, there's a notable difference. The leaf count went up almost every other day with the CO2 Gans plants, and the soil plants, you know, they would grow and then level off, grow and level off, as you can see according to the chart.
Okay, Douglas, will we show the video?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. I'm gonna share a video, another short explanation by Douglas for a run through the whole setup that he made, so you can see it through video.
Hey, it's Douglas, February the 15th, 2016. Explaining my agricultural setup I have here. This is a water filtration device. As you can see, we got copper, brass, black iron, galvanized. Inside the galvanized pipe, there's pictures that show the nano structure out of copper that I made inside the tube here. This is a filter. This goes down, back up into the CO2 Gans water energizer tube. This is 1/4 inch copper tubing, vinyl tubing, 1/2 inch OD outside. The copper tubing has been nano-coated. It's been caustic coated and fire coated. And the vinyl tubing has been caustic coated. There's CO2 Gans inside of it. As you can see, these are the caps to fill a CO2 Gans. It's a water line, and it feeds the drip system. The drip system feeds each plant equally, and I have a device, a valve, where I can slow ones down and speed ones up. This is the soil, Cantaloupe soil. As you can see, it's a good color, it's healthy, it's vibrant, but compared to the drip feed with no nutrients, just energized water, tap water, mind you, and my tap water is horrible. And this is RO water coming out of my filtered system, and it filters in at 7.013, I think, on the pH, and 5 parts per million. This is the CO2 Gans in the soil. As you can see, compared to the other one in the soil, it is almost 3 times the size. The CO2 Gans requires water about once a week. This one requires water, the regular water requires water every other day. This is a high pressure mist system, and we will, as you can see, it is, this was set into motion on the 2nd, transplanted. It went through a few days of shock. And as you can see, in less than 2 weeks, look at the root growth we got here. And inside the bucket, you can see is a series of jets that go around, and it's set on a timer, and it feeds 4 times a day. Now, there is only CO2 Gans in this bucket and distilled water. That's all that's in there. And I put 2 gallons of distilled water. I put 20 milliliters of CO2 Gans in there, straight CO2 Gans to 2 gallons. And you can see it's took off. It's got past the shock. It's growing like a weed now, and roots are phenomenal. We have another tray set up here with another nano-coated structure that we're going to have up and running as soon as these seeds over here are germinated. We do have some ginseng that has germinated finally, and we set it out on the 10th of January, so it's been over a month. Ginseng is a real hard plant to get to germinate. I have 5 in the CO2 that have germinated, and only 1, and I'm not sure about the one on the RO water. As for my other seeds, I got beefsteak tomato in RO and CO2 Gans. I've got market more cucumber in water and CO2 Gans, and I've got cayenne pepper in water and CO2 Gans. And you can see the RO water there, the light's getting to it. I broke it open today. They still haven't germinated. Which I'm starting to wonder if these aren't some bad seeds. I have had some, like I said, the ginseng has germinated now in the CO2 Gans, and I have had a few of the tomatoes on the RO and CO2 Gans that have germinated. The rest of these seeds have not germinated, and I'm wondering if they're too old. They were in the package from last year. And I thought I would try them. They're not germinating, so I'm going to think that that might be a failure on these right here on these 4. But these 4 here, we're going to get put in. I've got peat moss pellets, and they will go in the pellets tomorrow or tonight actually, and they'll stay in the pellets until they come up above the soil and start root growth over here in this tray. I'll put them in that float bed right there in that tray, and they will sit there until they get tall enough to transplant, and then I'll transplant them over here to where they'll be drip fed. I'm going to keep the CO2 Gans in the drip feed section. I'll keep the RO in soil over here on this side, on the tomatoes. Construction of the Energizer 2 was per the schematic diagram, and this is a small setup here. It's not an elaborate setup, and it's not big enough for a house. As you can see, it's low pressure. It's a drip feed system. It's not designed for high pressure, even though I do have a pretty strong pump on it. Now the nano-coated structure can be made with a bigger pipe and a bigger vinyl tubing to adequately accommodate household pressure or pressures that exceed 35 to 40 pounds. This here is hard pipe copper, hard pipe brass, hard pipe black iron, hard pipe galvanized with 4 pieces of nano copper inside of this in a spherical design that I call the filter. And this is a nano-coated copper filtration device. And like I said, it circulates the water through the Energizer tube. Energizer tube feeds the plants. They drain down through the drain there. And they come through my homemade filter here, which is a fish net. And as you can see, it's falling about 13 inches there. So there's plenty of aeration. There's no need in an air pump. The pump continually feeds 24/7. I've got a small heater in here to keep it above 70 degrees in here. This was a problem this winter, trying to keep this place warm, so I've enclosed it in here on this side of my building so I could keep this warm, because it's a pretty big building out here. So now we've got that problem solved. We can have everything up and running properly like it should be. But this is just an update. Like I said, February 15, 2016. And CO2 copper nano Energizer tubes, water filtration device, drip feed irrigation system, soil and CO2 Gans in controlled environments, and high pressure CO2 Gans, high pressure spray mist setup with CO2 Gans. And like I said, we've got some more coming. We'll have this one done here probably in the next day or so. Finish nano coating the inside and outside of it. It's been caustic coated inside. Now I have to nano coat the outside and caustic coat it again and get it set up. And it'll be a drip, also another drip irrigation system that will